Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're going to be diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is Isis Unveiled. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note again today, almost certainly, is going to be the unconventional Bible study. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Isis Unveiled with Part 2, Chapter 8. Christian and Catholic sons may accuse their fathers of the crime of heresy, although they may know that their parents will be burnt with fire and put to death for it, and not only may they refuse them food if they attempt to turn them from the Catholic faith, but they may also justly kill them. Jesuit precept. Father Stephen Fagundes in Procepta Decalogi Lugduni 1640. Most wise, what hour is it? Respect, K.S. Warden. It is the first hour of the day, the time when the veil of the temple was rent asunder, when darkness and consternation were spread over the earth, when the light was darkened, when the implements of masonry were broken, when the flaming star disappeared, when the cubic stone was broken, when the word was lost. Magna est veritas et prevelebit. Chabulun. I do not know what this is. I'm not even sure what language that is. The greatest of the Kabbalistic works of the Hebrews, Zohar, was compiled by Rabbi Simeon ben Ioke. According to some critics, this was done years before the Christian era. According to others, only after the destruction of the temple. However, it was completed only by the son of Simeon, Rabbi Eleazar, and his secretary, Rabbi Abba. For the work is so immense and the subjects treated so abstruse that even the whole life of this rabbi, called the Prince of Kabbalists, did not suffice for the task. On account of its being known that he was in possession of this knowledge and of the Merkabah, which ensured the reception of the Word, his very life was endangered, and he had to fly to the wilderness, where he lived in a cave for 12 years, surrounded by faithful disciples, and finally died there amid signs and wonders. But voluminous as is the work, and containing as it does the main points of the secret and oral tradition, it still does not embrace it all. It is well known that this venerable Kabbalist never imparted the most important points of his doctrine otherwise than orally, and to a very limited number of friends and disciples, including his only son. Therefore, without the final initiation into the Merkabah, the study of the Kabbalah will ever be incomplete, and the Merkabah can be taught only in darkness, in a deserted place, and after many and terrific trials. Since the death of Simeon ben Ioke, this hidden doctrine has remained an inviolate secret for the outside world. Delivered only as a mystery, it was communicated to the candidate orally, face to face and mouth to ear. This Masonic commandment, mouth to ear and the word at low breath, is an inheritance from the 10 I.M. and the old pagan mysteries. Its modern use must certainly be due to the indiscretion of some renegade Kabbalist, though the word itself is but a substitute for the lost word, and is comparatively modern in invention, as we will further show. The real sentence has remained forever in the sole possession of the adepts of various countries of the eastern and western hemispheres. Only a limited number among the chiefs of the Templars and some Rosicrucians of the 17th century, always in close relations with Arabian alchemists and initiates, could really boast of its possession. Well, I don't know that I have the same word, but I do have a word, and it is an effective word, and it has allowed me to access what I believe is the same thing as the Merkabah. So, yeah, there's that. From the 7th to the 15th centuries, there was no one who could claim it in Europe, and although there had been alchemists before the days of Paracelsus, He was the first who had passed through the true initiation, that last ceremony which conferred on the adept the power of traveling towards the burning bush over the holy ground, and to burn the golden calf in fire, grind it to powder, and strew it upon the water. Verily, then, this magic water and the lost word resuscitated more than one of the pre-Mosaic Adoriniums, Gedaliahs, and Hiram Abiffs. The real word, now substituted by Macbinac and Ma, was used ages before its pseudo-magical effect was tried on the widows' sons of the last 2 centuries. Who was, in fact, the first operative Mason of any consequence? Elias Ashmole, the last of the Rosicrucians and alchemists, admitted to the freedom of the operative Masons' Company in London in 1646. He died in 1692. At that time, Masonry was not what it became later. It was neither a political nor a Christian institution, but a true, secret organization, which admitted into the ties of fellowship all men anxious to obtain the priceless boon of liberty of conscience and avoid clerical prosecution. Not until about 30 years after his death did what is now termed modern Freemasonry see the light. It was born on the 24th day of June, 1717, in the Apple Tree Tavern, Charles Street, Covent Garden, London. It was then, as we are told in Anderson's Constitutions, that the only 4 lodges in the south of England elected Anthony Sayer first Grand Master of Masons. Notwithstanding its great youth, this Grand Lodge has ever claimed the acknowledgment of its supremacy by the whole body of the fraternity throughout the whole world. As the Latin inscription on the plate put beneath the cornerstone of the Freemasons' Hall, London, in 1775, would tell those who could see it. But more of this anon. In Die Kabbalah by Frank, the author, following its esoteric ravings, as he expresses it, gives us, in addition to the translations, his commentaries. Speaking of his predecessors, he says that Simeon ben Ioke mentions repeatedly what the companions have taught in the older works, and the author cites one Aiba the Old and Hamnuna the Old. But what the 2 old ones mean, or who they were, in fact, he tells us not, for he does not know himself. Among the venerable sect of the Tanaim, or rather the Tananim, the wise men, there were those who taught the secrets practically and initiated some disciples into the grand and final mystery. But the Mishnah Hagiga, 2nd section, says that the table of contents of the Merkaba must only be delivered to the wise old ones. The Gemara is still more dogmatic. The more important secrets of the mysteries were not even revealed to all priests, let alone the initiates had them divulged. And so we find the same great secrecy prevalent in every ancient religion. But, as we see, neither the Zohar nor any other Kabbalistic volume contains merely Jewish wisdom. The doctrine itself, being the result of whole millenniums of thought, is therefore the joint property of adepts of every nation under the sun. Nevertheless, the Zohar teaches practical occultism more than any other work on that subject, not as it is translated, though, and commented upon by its various critics, but with the secret signs on its margins. These signs contain the hidden instructions, apart from the metaphysical interpretations and apparent absurdities so fully credited by Josephus, who was never initiated, and gave out the dead letter as he had received it. The real, practical magic contained within the Zohar and other Kabbalistic works is only of use to those who read it within. The Christian apostles, at least those who are said to have produced miracles at will, had to be acquainted with this science. It ill behooves a Christian to look with horror or derision upon magic, gems, amulets, and other talismans against the evil eye, which serve as charms to exercise a mysterious influence, either on the possessor or on the person whom the magician desires to control. There are still extant a number of such charmed amulets in public and private collections of antiquities. I'm going to go ahead and pause right here really quick to point out the fact that tools do nothing on their own. You can imbibe a amulet or a talisman with a small measure of power for a short period of time, but it is not an active element. It is a passive element, and it will wear off fairly quickly. So most of the things that people have are really quite useless. And that is not even taking into account the charlatans who are probably trying to hawk them off on you. Illustrations of convex gems with mysterious legends, the meaning of which baffles all scientific inquiry, are given by many collectors. King shows several in such in his Gnostics, and he describes a white carnelian, chalcedony, covered on both sides with interminable legends, to interpret which would ever prove a failure. Yes, in every case, perhaps, but that of a hermetic student or an adept. But we refer the reader to his interesting work, and the talismans described in his plates, to show that even the Seer of Patmos himself was well versed in this Kabbalistic science of talisman and gems. St. John clearly alludes to the potent white carnelian, a gem well known among adepts as the alba petra, or the stone of initiation, on which the word prize is generally found engraved, as it was given to the candidate who had successfully passed through all the preliminary trials of a neophyte. The fact is that no less than the book of Job, the whole Revelation, is simply an allegorical narrative of the mysteries and initiation therein of a candidate who is John himself. I find that extremely hard to believe, right? This right here, I have done a study on the book of Job. It is part of the Unconventional Bible Study, and it has nothing to do with Mosaic law. It has nothing to do with the Jewish people whatsoever. But it also was not even close to anything contained within Revelation, nor is it a narrative of the mysteries in any way, shape, or form, as far as I can determine. It is a story, and it has a reason, it has a meaning, there is all kinds of things there. It's letting you know that God is not working on the same frequency that is intimated in the Old Testament, right? The Job is completely out of place entirely with all of the Old Testament. It is almost certainly taken from somewheres, and I don't find anything of the mysteries in it whatsoever. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. Right? And I don't say that often or lightly. No high mason, well versed in the different degrees, can fail to see it. Now, that may be part of your club, right? Y'all believe in some wild things in the club. Y'all practice magic, and y'all don't know what it is or believe in it, but you do it, right? You're out there with your athames and your wands and drawing all of the different signs and symbols, but you don't know what they mean, and you don't understand what you are actually doing with it. That is from your own works. And so I don't doubt that the club has told you that there may be something in Job that fits with the mysteries. I don't see it, but it's possible that there is some hidden knowledge. But the book of Job and the book of Revelation, no correlation whatsoever. None. There's no correlation between those two. The numbers 7, 12, and others are also many lights thrown over the obscurity of the work. There are important numbers. Paracelsus maintained the same some centuries ago, and when we find the one like unto the Son of Man, saying, chapter 2:17, to him that overcometh I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, the Word, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it. What master mason can doubt but it refers to the last headline of this chapter? In the pre-Christian Mithraic mysteries, the candidate who fearlessly overcame the 12 tortures which preceded the final initiation received a small round cake or wafer of unleavened bread, symbolizing, in one of its meanings, the solar disk, and known as the heavenly bread or manna, and having figures traced on it. A lamb or a bull was killed, and with the blood the candidate had to be sprinkled, as in the case of Emperor Julian's initiation. And I want to point out right here, as I have so many times, all the way through the Bible study and through these various studies. If there is any type of killing of an animal and the blood being used, you are 100% serving the wrong entities. You are aligned with the wrong side of the fight. 100% of the time, if there is a blood sacrifice involved, you are doing it wrong. The 7 rolls or mysteries were then delivered to the newly born that are represented in the Revelation as the 7 seals which are opened in order. There can be no doubt that the seer of Patmos referred to this ceremony. Now, again, you're probably serving the wrong entity, and as we went through, as we did the prophecy, right, the unconventional prophecy, which is contained in the Bible study, prophecy has a problem. The problem with prophecy is you can only interpret prophecy according to what you already know. Right? If you were to pull Isaiah and sit him here right next to me, he would have no idea how to describe almost anything in this room. Right? I have a scroll that he could understand that you write on this thing, but he wouldn't understand this screen or this microphone or that camera. He wouldn't understand that in the slightest bit. He would try to explain it to the best that he could. It's a talking rock. And it glows and it gives you information from somewhere. He would understand kinda that much, and he'd try to describe it the best that he could. But he is limited by the things that he knows. Now, if I had him here for a year, I could train him in what these things are, if we overcame the language barrier, and how to use them. With proficiency, he would be able to do those things. And then he could describe them in more accurate detail. But as far as just pulling him from the past and setting him right here, he would have no idea how to describe this. That is the problem with prophecy. It doesn't matter who's giving the prophecy. It doesn't matter what the prophecy is. You can only interpret it according to the things that you know. So, when we look at John and Patmos and all of the things that were going on there, he is interpreting what he sees in the best way that he can according to what he already knows. He has a figure appear to him who doesn't look like Jesus, who calls himself Jesus, and he's like, okay, I recognize the voice. Like, it's kind of wild, some of the assumptions that are built into that particular set of prophecies, right? I spent an awful lot of time on those prophecies in my life, and we have done them in some great detail as we went through the Bible study. So, the origin of the Roman Catholic amulets and relics blessed by the Pope is the same as that of the Ephesian spell, or magical characters engraved either on a stone or drawn on a piece of parchment. The Jewish amulets with verses out of the law and called phylacteria, and the Mohammedan charms with verses of the Quran. All of these were used as protective magic spells and worn by the believers on their persons. Epiphanius, the worthy ex-Marcosian, who speaks of these charms when used by the Manichaeans as amulets, that is to say, things worn around the neck, periapta, and incantations and such like trickery, cannot well throw a slur upon the trickery of the pagans and Gnostics without including the Roman Catholic and Popish amulets. We have severe problems with the Catholic Church, and that is one of them. But consistency is a virtue which we fear is losing under Jesuit influence the slight hold it may have ever had on the Church. That crafty, learned, conscienceless, terrible soul of Jesuitism within the body of Romanism is slowly but surely possessing itself of the whole prestige and spiritual power that clings to it. For the better exemplification of our theme, it will be necessary to contrast the moral principles of the ancient Tanaim and Theurgist with those professed by the modern Jesuits, who practically control Romanism today, and are the hidden enemy that would-be reformers must overcome and encounter and overcome. Throughout the whole of antiquity, where, in what land, can we find anything like this order or anything even approaching it? We owe a place to the Jesuits in this chapter on secret societies, for more than any other they are a secret body, and have a far closer connection with actual Masonry, in France and Germany at least, than people are generally aware of. The cry of an outraged public morality was raised against this order from its very birth. Barely 15 years had elapsed after the bull approving its constitution was promulgated, when the members began to be driven away from one place to the other. Portugal and the Low Countries got rid of them in 1578, France in 1594, Venice in 1606, Naples in 1622. From St. Petersburg they were expelled in 1815, and from all Russia in 1820. It was a promising child from its very teens. What it grew up to be everyone knows well. The Jesuits have done more moral harm in this world than all the fiendish armies of the mythical Satan. Whatever extravagance may be seen to be involved in this remark will disappear when our readers in America, who know very little about them, are made acquainted with their principles and rules as they appear in various works written by the Jesuits themselves. We beg leave to remind the public that every one of the statements which follow in quotation marks are extracted from authenticated manuscripts, or folios printed by this distinguished body. Many are copied from the large quarto, published by the authority of and verified and collated by the commissioners of the French Parliament. The statements therein were collected and presented to the king in order that, as the Arrest du Parlement du 5 Mars 1762 expresses it, the eldest son of the Church might be made aware of the perversity of this doctrine, a doctrine authorizing theft, lying, perjury, impurity, every passioning crime, teaching homicide, parricide, and regicide, overthrowing religion in order to substitute for it superstition, by favoring sorcery, blasphemy, irreligion, and idolatry, etc. Let us then examine the ideas on magic of the Jesuits. Writing on this subject in his Secret Instructions, Anthony Escobar says, now, bear in mind that the current Pope, as of 2024, is a Jesuit. It is lawful to make use of the science acquired through the assistance of the devil, provided the preservation and use of that knowledge do not depend upon the devil, for the knowledge is good in itself, and the sin by which it was acquired has gone by. Hence, why should not a Jesuit cheat the devil as well as he cheats every layman? Astrologers and soothsayers are either bound or are not bound to restore the reward of their divination if the event does not come to pass. I own, remarks the good Father Escobar, that the former opinion does not at all please me, because when the astrologer or diviner has exerted all the diligence in the diabolic art which is essential to his purpose, he has fulfilled his duty, whatever may be the result, as the physician is not bound to restore his fee if his patient should die, so neither is the astrologer bound to restore his charge, except where he has used no effort, or was ignorant of his diabolic art, because when he has used his efforts in his endeavors, he has not deceived. Further, we find the following on astrology. If anyone affirms, through conjecture founded upon the influence of the stars and the character, disposition of a man, that he will be a soldier, an ecclesiastic, or a bishop, this divination may be devoid of all sin, because the stars and the disposition of the man may have the power of inclining the human will to a certain lot or rank, but not of constraining it. Busenbaum and Lacroix in Theologia Moralis say, palmistry may be considered lawful if, from the lines and the divisions of the hands, it can ascertain the disposition of the body and conjecture, with probability, the propensities and affections of the soul. This noble fraternity, which many preachers have of late so vehemently denied to have ever been a secret one, has been sufficiently proved as such. Their constitutions were translated into Latin by the Jesuit Polancus, and printed in the College of the Society at Rome in 1558. They were jealously kept secret, the greater part of the Jesuits themselves knowing only extracts from them. They were never produced to the light until 1761, when they were published by order of the French Parliament in 1761. 1762, in the famous process of Father Lavalette. The degrees of the order are 1. Novices, 2. Lay brothers or temporal coadjustors, adjutors, 3. Scholastics, 4. Spiritual coadjutors, 5. Professed of 3 vows, 6. Professed of 5 vows. There is also a secret class, known only to the general and a few faithful Jesuits, which, perhaps more than any other, contributed to the dreaded and mysterious power of the order, says Niccolini. The Jesuits reckon it among the greatest achievements of their order that Loyola supported, by a special memorial to the Pope, a petition for the reorganization of that abominable and abhorred instrument of wholesale butchery, the infamous tribunal of the Inquisition. This order of Jesuits is now all-powerful in Rome. They have been reinstalled in the Congregation of Extraordinary Ecclesiastical Affairs, in the Department of the Secretary of State, and in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The pontifical government was, for years previous to Victor Emmanuel's occupation of Rome, entirely in their hands. The society now numbers 8,584 members. But we must see what are their chief rules. By what is seen above, and becoming acquainted with their mode of action, we may ascertain that the whole Catholic body is likely to be. Says Mackenzie, the order has secret signs and passwords according to the degrees to which the members belong, and as they wear no particular dress, it is very difficult to recognize them unless they reveal themselves as members of the order. For they may appear as Protestants or Catholics, Democrats or aristocrats, infidels or bigots, according to the special mission with which they are entrusted. Their spies are everywhere, of all apparent ranks of society, and they may appear learned and wise, or simple and foolish, as their instructions run. There are Jesuits of both sexes and all ages, and it is well-known fact that members of the order, of high family and delicate nurture, are acting as menial servants in Protestant families, and doing other things of a similar nature in aid of the society's purposes. We cannot be too much on our guard, for the whole society, being founded on a law of unhesitating obedience, can bring its force on any given point with unerring and fatal accuracy. The Jesuits maintain that the Society of Jesus is not of human invention, but it proceeded from him whose name it bears. For Jesus himself described that rule of life which the society follows, first by his example and afterwards by his words. Let, then, all pious Christians listen and acquaint themselves with this alleged rule of life and precepts of their God, as exemplified by the Jesuits. Peter Alagona, St. Thomas Aquinas Summa Theologicae Compendium, says, by the command of God it is lawful to kill an innocent person, to steal, or commit ex mandato dilecit occidere innocitum furore fornicari, because he is the Lord of life and death and all things, and it is due to him thus to fulfill his command. Ex prima secunde, quaest 94. A man of a religious order, who for a short time lays aside his habit for a sinful purpose, is free from heinous sin, and does not incur the penalty of excommunication. John Baptist Taberna, Synopsis Theologiae Practicae, propounds the following question. Is a judge bound to restore the bribe which he has received for passing sentence? Answer. If he has received the bribe for passing an unjust sentence, it is probable that he may keep it. The opinion is maintained and defended by 58 doctors, Jesuits. We must abstain at present from proceeding further. So disgustingly licentious, hypocritical, and demoralizing are nearly all of these precepts, that it was found impossible to put many of them in print, except in the Latin language. We will return to some of the more decent as we proceed, for the sake of comparison, But what are we to think of the future of the Catholic world if it is to be controlled in word and deed by this villainous society? And again, I point out that the current pontiff is a member. And that it is to be so, we can hardly doubt, as we find the Cardinal Archbishop of Cambrai loudly proclaiming the same to all the faithful. His pastoral has made a certain noise in France, and yet, as 2 centuries have rolled away since the expose of these infamous principles, the Jesuits have had ample time to lie so successfully in denying the just charges that most Catholics will never believe such a thing. The infallible Pope Clement XIV, Ganganelli, suppressed them on the 23rd of July, 1773, and yet they came to life again, and another equally infallible Pope, Pius VII, re-established them on the 7th of August, 1814. But we will hear what the Monsignor of Cambrai is swift to proclaim in 1876. We quote from a secular paper. Among other things, he maintains that clericalism, ultramontanism, and Jesuitism are one and the same thing, that is to say, Catholicism, and that the distinctions between them have been created by the enemies of the religion. There was a time, he says, when a certain theological opinion was commonly professed in France concerning the authority of the Pope. It was restricted to our nation and was of recent origin. The civil power during a century and a half of imposed official instruction. Those who professed these opinions were called Galicians, and those who protested were called Ultramontanes, because they had their doctrinal center beyond the Alps, at Rome. Today the distinction between the 2 schools is no longer admissible. Theological Gallicanism can no longer exist, since this opinion has ceased to be tolerated by the Church. It has been solemnly condemned, past all return, by the Ecumenical Council of the Vatican. One cannot now be Catholic without being Ultramontane and Jesuit. This settles the question. We leave the inferences for the present and proceed to compare some of the practices and precepts of the Jesuits with those of the individual mystics and organized castes and societies of ancient time. Thus, the fair-minded reader may be placed in a position to judge between them as to the tendency of their doctrines to benefit or degrade humanity. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chananiah, who died about A.D. 72, openly declared that he had performed miracles by means of the book of Sefer Jezira and challenged every skeptic. Franck, quoting from the Babylonian Talmud, names 2 other thaumaturgists, Rabbis Kanina and Oshai. Simon Magus was doubtless a pupil of the Tanaim of Samaria. The reputation which he left behind, together with the title given to him of the great power of God, testifies strongly in the favor of the ability of his teachers. The calumnies so zealously disseminated against him by the unknown authors and compilers of the Acts and other writings could not cripple the truth to such an extent as to conceal the fact that no Christian could rival him in thaumaturgic deeds. The story told about his falling during an aerial flight, breaking both of his legs, and then committing suicide is ridiculous. Instead of praying mentally that it should so happen, why did not the apostles pray rather that they should be allowed to outdo Simon in wonders and miracles? For then they might have proved their case far more easily than they did, and so converted thousands to Christianity. Posterity has heard but one side of the story. Were the disciples of Simon to have a chance, we might find, perhaps, that it was Peter who broke both of his legs. Had we not known that the apostle was too prudent ever to venture himself in Rome. On the confession of several ecclesiastical writers, no apostle ever performed such supernatural wonders. Of course, pious people will say this only the more proves that it was the devil who worked through Simon. Simon was accused of blasphemy against the Holy Ghost because he introduced it as Holy Spiritus, the men's intelligence, or the mother of all. But we find the same expression used in the book of Enoch, in which, in contradistinction to the sons of man, he says, sons of the woman. In the Codex of the Nazarenes and in the Zohar, as well as in the books of Hermes, the expression is usual, and even in the apocryphal Evangelium of the Hebrews, we read that Jesus himself admitted the sex of the Holy Ghost by using the expression, "My mother, the Holy Pneuma." But what is the heresy of Simon, or what the blasphemies of all the heretics, in comparison with that of the same Jesuits who have now completely mastered the Pope, ecclesiastical Rome, and the entire Catholic world? Listen again to their profession of faith. Do what your conscience tells you to be good and commanded. If, through the invincible error, you believe lying or blasphemy to be commanded by God, blaspheme. Omit to do what your conscience tells you to do is forbidden. Omit the worship of God if you invincibly believe it to be prohibited by God. There is an implied law. Obey an invincibly erroneous dictate of conscience. As often as you believe invincibly that a lie is commanded, lie. Let us suppose a Catholic to believe invincibly that the worship of images is forbidden. In such a case, our Lord Jesus Christ will be obliged to say to him, "Depart from me, thou cursed, because thou hast worshipped mine image." So, neither is there any absurdity in supposing that Christ may say, "Come, thou blessed, because thou hast lied," believing invincibly that in such a case I commanded the lie. Does not this, but no, words fail to do justice to the emotions that these astonishing precepts must awaken in the breast of every honest person? Let silence, resulting from invincible disgust, be our only adequate tribute to such unparalleled moral obliquity. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce that. There is no circumstance in which it is okay to lie, right? Even the white lies. If your wife asks you, "Does this make me look fat?" Answer. If she don't like it, then she just shouldn't ask the question, right? That doesn't mean that you should demean anyone, ever, right? But you should always answer honestly, 100%. Do not bear false witness. That was one of the commandments, and if you believe in the commandments, you should follow them. I hold myself to a very high moral standard. The popular feeling in Venice, 1606, when the Jesuits were driven out from that city, expressed itself most forcibly. Great crowds had accompanied the exiles to the seashore, and a farewell cry which resounded after them over the waves was, "Ande in malora," "Get away and woe be to you." That cry was echoed throughout the 2 following centuries, says Mr. Lay, who gives the statement. In Bohemia in 1618, in India 1623, and throughout all Christendom 1773. In what particular was then Simon Magus a blasphemer, if he only did that which his conscience invincibly told him was true? And in what particular were ever the heretics, or even infidels, of the worst kind more reprehensible than the Jesuits, those of Cain, for instance, who say the following: "The Christian religion is evidently credible, but not evidently true. It is evidently credible, for it is evident that whoever embraces it is prudent. It is not evidently true, for it either teaches obscurely, or the things which it teaches are obscure. And they who affirm that the Christian religion is evidently true are obliged to confess that it is evidently false." See the Bible study. Infer from hence, 1, that it is not evident that there is now any true religion in the world. 2, that it is not evident that of all religions existing upon the earth, the Christian religion is the most true. For have you traveled over all countries of the world, or do you know that others have? 4, that it is not evident that the predictions of the prophets were given by inspiration of God. For what refutation will you bring against me if I deny that they were true prophecies, or assert that they were only conjectures? Yes, indeed, some man said that. Somebody wrote it down. You're right. That it is not evident that the miracles were real, which are recorded to have been wrought by Christ, although no one can prudently deny them. Position 6. Neither is an avowed belief in Jesus Christ and the Trinity and all the articles of faith and in the Decalogue necessary to Christians. The only explicit belief which was necessary to the former Jews and is necessary to the latter Christians is 1. Of God, 2. Of a rewarding God. Position 8. Hence, it is also more than evident that there are moments in the life of the greatest liar when he may utter some truths. It is in this case so perfectly exemplified by the good fathers that we can see more clearly than ever whence proceeded the solemn condemnations at the Ecumenical Council of 1870 of certain heresies, and the enforcement of other articles of faith in which none believed less than those who inspired the Pope to issue them. History has yet perhaps to learn that the octogenarian Pope, intoxicated with the fumes of his newly enforced infallibility, was but the faithful echo of the Jesuits. An old man is raised trembling upon the pavois of the Vatican, says Michelet. Everything becomes absorbed and confined in him. For 15 centuries Christendom has submitted to the spiritual yoke of the Church. But that yoke was not sufficient for them. They wanted the whole world to bend under the hand of one master. Here my own words are too weak. I shall borrow those of others. They, the Jesuits, wanted, this is the accusation flung in their faces by the Bishop of Paris and the full Council of Trent, faire de l'espouse de Jesus Christ une prostituée aux volontés d'un homme. They have succeeded. The Church is henceforth an inert tool, and the Pope a poor, weak instrument in the hands of this order. But for how long until the end comes, well may sincere Christians remember the prophetic lamentations of the thrice great Trismegistus over his own country. We have done the works of Hermes. It is part of the ancient lore playlist. Alas, alas, my son, a day will come when the sacred hieroglyphics will become but idols. The world will mistake the emblems of science for God and accuse grand Egypt of having worshipped hell monsters. But those who will calumniate us thus will themselves worship death instead of life, folly in place of wisdom, and will denounce love and fecundity, fill their temples with dead men's bones as relics, and waste their youth in solitude and tears. Their virgins will be widows, nuns, before being wives, and consume themselves in grief, because men will have despised and profaned the sacred mysteries of Isis. How correct this prophecy is proved, we find in the following Jesuit precept, which, again, we extract from the report of the commissioners to the Parliament of Paris. The more true opinion is that all inanimate and irrational things may be legitimately worshipped, says Father Gabriel Vasquez, treating of idolatry. If the doctrine which we have established to be rightly understood, not only may a painted image and every holy thing, set forth by public authority for the worship of God, be properly adored with God as the image of himself, but also any other thing in this world, whether it be inanimate and irrational, or in its nature rational. Why may we not adore and worship with God, apart from danger, anything whatsoever of this world? For God is in it according to his essence. This is precisely what the pantheist and Hindu philosophy maintains, and preserves it continually by his power. And when we bow down ourselves before it, and impress it with a kiss, we present ourselves before God, the author of it, with the whole soul as used unto the prototype of the image. Follow instances of relics, etc. To this we may add that, since everything in the world is the work of God, and God is always abiding and working in it, we may more readily conceive him to be in it than a saint in the vesture which belonged to him, and therefore, without regarding in any way the dignity of the thing created, to direct our thoughts to God, while we give to the creature the sign and mark of submission by a kiss or prostration, is neither vain nor superstitious, but an act of the purest religion. A precept this, which, whether or not doing honor to the Christian Church, may at least be profitably quoted by any Hindu, Japanese, or other heathen when rebuked for his worship of idols. We purposely quote it for the benefit of our respected heathen friends who will see these lines. The prophecy of Hermes is less equivocal than either of the alleged prophecies of Isaiah, which have furnished a pretext for saying that the gods of all the nations were demons. Only facts are stronger sometimes than the strongest faith. All that the Jews learned they had from the older nations than themselves. The Chaldean Magi were their masters in the secret doctrine, and it was during the Babylonian captivity that they learned its metaphysical as well as practical tenets. Pliny mentioned 3 schools of Magi, one that he shows to have been founded at an unknown antiquity, the other established by Osthenes and Zoroaster, the third by Moses and Jambres, and all of the knowledge possessed by these different schools, whether Magian, Egyptian, or Jewish, was derived from India, or rather from both sides of the Himalayas. Many a lost secret lies buried under the waste of sand in the Gobi Desert of eastern Turkestan, and the wise men of Khotan have preserved strange traditions and knowledge of alchemy. Baron Bunsen shows that the origin of the ancient prayers and hymns of the Egyptian Book of the Dead is anterior to Menes and belongs probably to the pre-Menite dynasty of Abydos between 3100 and 4500 BC. The learned Egyptologist makes that era of Menes, or national empire, as not later than 3059 BC, and demonstrates that the system of Osirian worship and mythology was already formed before this era of Menes. We can find in the hymns of this scientifically established pre-Edenic epoch, for Bunsen carries us back several centuries beyond the year of creation of the world, 4004 BC, as fixed by biblical chronology, precise lessons of morality, identical in substance and nearly so in form of expression with those preached by Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount. We give the authority of the most eminent Egyptologist and hierologist for our statement. The inscriptions of the 12th dynasty are filled with ritualistic formulae, says Bunsen. Extracts from the Hermetic books are found on monuments of the earliest dynasties, and on those of the 12th dynasty portions of an earlier ritual are by no means uncommon. To feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, bury the dead, form the first duty of a pious man, unless you are a Jew. The doctrine of the immortality of the soul is as old as this period. Like, they were particularly kept from doing this. Right? If you were a pious man or a Levite, you were not allowed to do this. And far older, perhaps, it dates from the time when the soul was an objective being. Hence, when it could not hardly be denied by itself, when humanity was a spiritual race and death existed not. I don't believe in that. Towards the decline of the cycle of life, the ethereal man-spirit then fell into the sweet slumber of temporary unconsciousness in one sphere, only to find himself awakening in the still brighter light of a higher one. But while the spiritual man is ever striving to ascend higher and higher towards its source of being, passing through the cycles and spheres of individual life, physical man had to descend with the great cycle of universal creation until it found itself clothed with the terrestrial garments. Thenceforth the soul was too deeply buried under physical clothing to reassert its existence, except in the cases of those more spiritual natures which, with every cycle, become more rare. And yet, none of the prehistorical nations ever thought of denying either the existence or the immortality of the inner man, the real self. Only, we must bear in mind the teachings of the old philosophies. The spirit alone is immortal. The soul, per se, is neither eternal nor divine. When linked too closely with the physical brain of its terrestrial casket, it gradually becomes a finite mind, a simple animal and sentient life principle, the nephesh of the Hebrew Bible. Right? And again, I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that the soul is eternal. It was somewhere prior to being here. It will be somewhere after here. And that is a part of the divine. Right? Not divine in and of itself, but definitely eternal, and definitely a part of the divine. The doctrine of man's triune nature is as clearly defined in the Hermetic books as it is in Plato's system, or again in that of the Buddhist or Brahmanical philosophies. And this is one of the most important as well as least understood of the doctrines of Hermetic science. The Egyptian mysteries, so imperfectly known by the world, and only through the few brief allusions to them in the Metamorphoses of Apuleius, taught the greatest virtues. They unveiled to the aspirant in the higher mysteries of initiation that which many of our modern Hermetic students vainly search for in the Kabbalistic books, and which no obscure teachings of the Church, under the guidance of the Order of Jesuits, will ever be able to unveil. To compare, then, the ancient secret societies of the Hierophants with the artificially produced hallucinations of those few followers of Loyola, who were, perchance, sincere at the beginning of their career, is to insult the former, and yet, in justice to them, we are compelled to do so. One of the most unconquerable obstacles to initiation, with the Egyptians as with the Greeks, was any degree of murder. One of the greatest titles to admission in the order of Jesuits is a murder in defense of Jesuitism. Children may kill their parents if they compel them to abandon the Catholic faith. Christian and Catholic sons, says Stephen Fagundes, may accuse their fathers of the crime of heresy if they wish to turn them from the faith, although they may know that their parents will be burned with fire and put to death for it, as Tolet teaches, and not only may they refuse them food, but they may also justly kill them. It is well known that Nero, the emperor, had never dared seek initiation into the mysteries on account of the murder of Agrippina. Under section 14 of the Principles of the Jesuits, we find, on homicide, the following Christian principles inculcated by the Father Henry Henriquez in Summae Theologicae Moralis, Thomas I, Venetius, 1600, et col. Siam. If an adulterer, even though he should be an ecclesiastic, being attacked by the husband, kills his aggressor, he is not considered irregular, non reditur irregularis. If a father were obnoxious to the state, being in banishment, and to the society at large, and there were no other means of averting such an injury, then I should approve of this, for a son to kill his father, on parricide and homicide. It will be lawful for an ecclesiastic or one of the religious order to kill a calumniator who threatens to spread atrocious accusations against himself or his religion, is the rule set forth by the Jesuit Francis Amicus. So far, so good. We are informed by the highest authorities what a man in the Catholic communion may do that the common law and public morality stamp as criminal, and still continue in the odor of juridical sanctity. Now, suppose we again turn the medal and see what principles were inculcated by the pagan Egyptian moralist before the world was blessed with these modern improvements in ethics. In Egypt, every city of importance was separated from its burial place by a sacred lake. The same ceremony of judgment, which the Book of Dead describes as taking place in the world of spirit, took place on earth during the burial of the mummy. 42 judges, or assessors, assembled on the shore and judged the departing soul, according to its actions when in the body, and it was only upon a unanimous approval of this post-mortem jury that the boatman, who represented the spirit of death, could convey the justified defunct body to its last resting place. After that, the priest returned within the sacred precincts and instructed the neophytes upon the probable solemn drama which was then taking place in the invisible realm, whither the soul had fled. The immortality of the spirit was strongly inculcated by the Al-Amjah. In the Krata Rapoa, the following is described as the 7 degrees of the initiation. After a preliminary trial at Thebes, where the neophyte had to pass through many trials, called the 12 tortures, he was commanded to govern his passions, and never lose for a moment the idea of God. Then, as a symbol of the wanderings of the unpurified soul, he had to ascend several ladders, and wander in darkness in a cave with many doors, all of which were locked. When he had overcome the dreadful trials, he received the degree of Pastochorus, the second and third degrees being called the Neochorus and the Melanophorus. Brought into a vast subterranean chamber, thickly furnished with mummies, lying in state, he was placed in presence of the coffin which contained the mutilated body of Osiris, covered with blood. This was the hall called Gates of Death, and it is most certainly to this mystery that the passages in the book of Job 38:17 and other portions of the Bible allude when the gates are spoken of. No, he is talking about sitting at a literal gate. In chapter 10, we give the esoteric interpretation of the book of Job, which is the poem of initiation par excellence. I am going to be very much interested in seeing that because I have done my own study of this. Have the gates of death been opened to thee? Hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Asked the Lord. In example, the Alam Jah, the initiator of Job, alluding to this third degree of initiation. When the neophyte had conquered the terrors of this trial, he was conducted to the Hall of Spirits to be judged by them. Among the rules in which he was instructed, he was commanded never either to desire or seek revenge, to always be ready to help a brother in danger, even unto the risk of his own life, to bury every dead body, to honor his parents above all, respect old age and protect those weaker than himself, and finally, to ever bear in mind the hour of death and that of resurrection in a new and imperishable body. Purity and chastity were highly recommended, and adultery threatened with death. Then the Egyptian neophyte was made a Christophorus. In this degree, the mystery name of Io was communicated to him. The fifth degree was that of Balahala, and he was instructed by Horus in alchemy, the word being chemia. In the sixth, the priestly dance in the circle was taught to him, in which he was instructed in astronomy, for it represented the course of the planets. In the seventh degree, he was initiated into the final mysteries. After a final probation in a building set apart for it, the astronomus, as he was now called, emerged from these sacred apartments called Maneras and received a cross, the Tao, which, at death, had to be laid upon his breast. He was a hierophant. We have read the above rules of these holy initiates of the Christian Society of Jesus. Compare them with those enforced upon the pagan postulant, and Christian morality with that inculcated by those mysteries of the pagans upon which all the thunders of an avenging deity are invoked by the Church. Had the latter no mysteries of its own, or were they in any wise purer, nobler, or more inciting to a holy virtuous life? Let us hear what Niccolini has to say in his able History of the Jesuits of the modern mysteries of the Christian cloister. In most monasteries, and more particularly in those of the Capuchins and Reformati, there begins at Christmas a series of feasts which continues till Lent. All sorts of games are played, and the most splendid banquets are given. And in the small towns, above all, the refectory of the convent is the best place of amusement for the greater number of the inhabitants. At carnivals, 2 or 3 very magnificent entertainments take place, the board so profusely spread that one might imagine that Copia had here poured forth the whole contents of a horn. It must be remembered that these two orders live by alms. The sombre silence of the cloister is replaced by a confused sound of merrymaking, and its gloomy vaults now echo with other songs than those of the psalmist. A ball enlivens and terminates the feast, and, to render it still more animated, and perhaps to show how completely their vow of chastity has eradicated all their carnal appetite, some of the young monks appear coquettishly dressed in the garb of the fair sex, and begin to dance along with others, transformed into gay cavaliers. To describe the scandalous scene which ensues would be but to disgust the readers. I will only say that I have myself often been a spectator at such saturnalia. The cycle is moving down, and as it descends, the physical and bestial nature of man develops more and more at the expense of the spiritual self. With what may discussed, we may not turn from this religious farce called modern Christianity to the noble faiths of old. In the Egyptian funeral ritual found among the hymns of the Book of the Dead, and which is termed by Bunsen that precious and mysterious book, we read an address of the deceased in the character of Horus, detailing all that he has done for his father, Osiris. Among other things, the deity says, 30. I have given thee thy spirit. 31. I have given thee thy soul. And 32. I have given thee thy force, body, etc. In another place in the entity, addressed as Father by the disembodied soul, is shown to mean the spirit of man, for the verse says, I have made my soul come and speak with his Father, its spirit. The Egyptians regarded their ritual as essentially a divine inspiration. In short, as modern Hindus do the Vedas, and modern Jews their Mosaic books. Bunsen and Lepsius show that the term Hermetic means inspired, for it is Tehote, the deity itself, that speaks and reveals to his elect among the men the will of God and the arcana of divine things. Portions of them are expressly stated to have been written by the very finger of Tehote himself, to have been the work and composition of the great god. At a later period their Hermetic character is still more distinctly recognized, and on a coffin of the 26th dynasty, Horus announces to the deceased that Tehote himself has brought him the books of his divine words, or Hermetic writings. Since we are aware that Moses was an Egyptian priest, or Midianite, or at least that he was learned in all their wisdom, we need not be astonished that he should write in Deuteronomy 9:10, And the Lord delivered unto me 2 tables of stones, written with the finger of God, or to find in Exodus 31. And he, the Lord, gave unto Moses 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the finger of God. You should fall back to Exodus in the Bible study and get more information about that for sure. In the Egyptian notations, as in those of all other faiths founded on philosophy, man was not merely, as with the Christians, a union of soul and body. He was a trinity when spirit was added to it. Besides, that doctrine made him consist of Kaha, body, Kahaba, astral form or shadow, Ka, animal soul or life principle, Ba, the higher soul, and Ak, the terrestrial intelligence. They had also a 6th principle, named Sa, or mummy, but the functions of this one commenced only after the death of the body. After due purification, during which the soul separated from its body, continued to revisit the latter in its mummified condition. This astral soul became a god, for it was finally absorbed into the soul of the world. It became transformed into one of the creative deities, the god of Ptah, the Demiurgos, a generic name for the creators of the world, rendered in the Bible as the Elohim. In the ritual, the good or purified soul, in conjunction with this higher or uncreated spirit, is more or less the victim of the dark influence of the dragon, Apophis. If it has attained the final knowledge of the heavenly and infernal mysteries, the gnosis, in example, complete reunion with the spirit, it will triumph over its enemies. If not, the soul could not escape its second death. It is the lake that burneth with fire and brimstone, elements, into which those that are cast undergo a second death, apocalypse. This death is the gradual dissolution of the astral form to its primal elements, alluded to several times already in the course of this work. But this awful fate can be avoided with the knowledge of the mysterious name, the Word, say the Kabbalists. And what then was the penalty attached to the neglect of it? When a man leads a naturally pure, virtuous life, there is none whatsoever, except delay in the world of spirits until he finds himself sufficiently purified to receive it from his spiritual Lord, one of the mighty host. But, if otherwise, the soul, as a half-animal principle, becomes paralyzed and grows unconscious of its subjective half, the Lord. And in proportion to the sensuous development of the brain and nerves, sooner or later, it finally loses sight of its divine mission on earth. Like the Vordelak, or vampire of the Servian tale, the brain feeds and lives and grows in strength and power at the expense of its spiritual parent. Then, the already half-unconscious soul, now fully intoxicated by the fumes of earthly life, becomes senseless, beyond hope of redemption. It is powerless to discern the splendor of its higher spirit, to hear the warning voice of its guardian angel and its God. It aims but at the development and fuller comprehension of natural, earthly life, and thus can discover but the mysteries of physical nature. It is grief. Its grief and fear, hope and joy, are all closely blended with its terrestrial existence. It ignores all that cannot be demonstrated by either its organs of action or sensation. It begins by becoming virtually dead. It dies at last completely. It is annihilated. Such a catastrophe may often happen long years before the final separation of the life principle from the body. When death arrives, its iron and clammy grasp finds work with life as usual. But there is no more soul to liberate. The whole essence of the latter has already been absorbed by the vital system of the physical man. Grim death frees but a spiritual corpse, at best an idiot. Unable either to soar higher or awaken from lethargy, it is soon dissolved in the elements of the terrestrial atmosphere. Seers, righteous men who had attained to the highest science of the inner man and the knowledge of truth, have, like Marcus Antonius, received instructions from the gods, in sleep and otherwise. Helped by the purer spirits, those that dwell in regions of eternal bliss, they have watched the progress and warned mankind repeatedly. Skepticism may sneer. Faith, based on knowledge and spiritual science, believes and affirms. Our present cycle is preeminently one of such soul deaths. We elbow soulless men and women at every step in life. Neither can we wonder, in the present state of things, at the gigantic failure of Hegel's and Schelling's last efforts at some metaphysical construction of a system. When facts, palpable and tangible facts of phenomenal spiritualism, happen daily and hourly, and yet are denied by the majority of civilized nations, little chance is there for acceptance of purely abstract metaphysics by the ever-growing crowd of materialists. In the book called by Champollion, La Manifestation de la Lumière, there is a chapter of the ritual which is full of mysterious dialogues, with addresses to various powers by the soul. Among these dialogues there is one which is more than expressive of the potentiality of the Word. The scene is laid in the Hall of the Two Truths. The door, the Hall of Truth, and even the various parts of the gate address the soul which presents itself for admission. They all forbid it entrance unless it tells them their mystery or mystic names. What student of the secret doctrines can fail to recognize in these names an identity of meaning and purpose with those to be met with in the Vedas and later works of the Brahmins and the Kabbalists? Magicians, Kabbalists, mystics, Neoplatonists, and Theurgists of Alexandria, who so surpassed the Christians in their achievements in the secret science. Brahmins or Samanians, shamans, of old, and modern Brahmins, Buddhists, and Lamists have all claimed that a certain power attaches to these various names, pertaining to one ineffable word. We have shown from personal experience how deeply the belief is rooted to this day in the popular mind all over Russia, that the word works miracles, is at the bottom of every magical feat. Kabbalists mysteriously connect faith with it. So did the apostles, basing their assertions on the words of Jesus, who is made to say, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, nothing shall be impossible unto you." And Paul, repeating the words of Moses, tells that, "The word is nigh thee, even in thy mouth and in thy heart, that is, the word of faith. But who, except the initiates, can boast of comprehending its full significance? In our day, it is as it was in the olden times. To believe in the biblical miracles requires faith, but to be enabled to produce them, oneself demands a knowledge of the esoteric meaning of the word. If Christ, says Dr. Farrer and Canon Westcott, wrought no miracles, then the Gospels are untrustworthy. But even supposing that he did work them, would that prove that Gospels written by others than himself are any more trustworthy? And if not, to what purpose is the argument? Besides, such a line of reasoning would warrant the analogy that miracles performed by other religionists than Christians ought to make their Gospels trustworthy. Does not this imply at least an equality between the Christian scriptures and the Buddhist sacred books? For these equally abound with the phenomena of the most astounding character. Moreover, the Christians have no longer genuine miracles produced through their priests, for they have lost the word. But many a Buddhist Lama or Siamese Talapoin, unless all travelers have conspired to lie, has been and now is able to duplicate every phenomenon described in the New Testament, and even do more, without any pretense of suspension of natural law or divine intervention either. In fact, Christianity proves that it is as dead in faith as it is dead in works, while Buddhism is full of vitality and supported by practical proofs. The best argument in favor of the genuineness of Buddhist miracles lies in the fact that Catholic missionaries, instead of denying them or treating them as simple jugglery, as some Protestant missionaries do, have often found themselves in such straits as to be forced to adopt the forlorn alternative of laying the whole on the back of the devil. And so belittled do the Jesuits feel themselves in the presence of these genuine servants of God, that with an unparalleled cunning they concluded to act in the case of the Talapoin and the Buddhist as Muhammad is said to have acted with the mountain. And seeing that it would not move towards him, the prophet moved himself towards the mountain. Finding that they could not catch the Siamese with the bird-lime of their pernicious doctrines and Christian garb, they disguised themselves, and for centuries appeared among the poor, ignorant people as Talapoin, until exposed. They have even voted and adopted a resolution forthwith, which has now all the force of an ancient article of faith. Naaman, the Syrian, says the Jesuits of Caen, did not dissemble his faith when he bowed the knee with the king in the house of Rimmon. Neither do the fathers of the Society of Jesus dissemble when they adopt the institute and the habit of the Talapoins of Siam. The potency contained in the mantras and the Vak of the Brahmins is as much believed at this day as it was in the early Vedic period. The ineffable name of every country and religion relates to that which the Masons affirm to be the mysterious characters emblematic of the 9 names or attributes by which the deity was known to the initiates. The omnific word, traced by Enoch on the 2 deltas of purest gold, on which he engraved 2 of the mysterious characters, is perhaps better known to the poor, uneducated heathen than to the highly accomplished Grand High Priest and Grand Z's of the supreme chapters of Europe and America. Only, why the companions of the Royal Ark should so bitterly and constantly lament its loss is more than we can understand. This word of is, as they will tell themselves, entirely composed of consonants. Hence, we doubt whether any of them could ever have mastered its pronunciation, had it even been brought to light from the secret vault, instead of its several corruptions. However, it is in the land of Mizraim that the grandson of Ham is credited with having carried the sacred delta of the patriarch Enoch. Therefore, it is in Egypt, and in the East alone, that the mysterious word must be sought. But now that so many of the most important secrets of Masonry have been divulged by friend and foe, may we not say without suspicion or malice or ill feeling that since the sad catastrophe of the Templars, no lodge in Europe, still less in America, has ever known anything worth concealing, reluctant to be misunderstood, we say no lodge, leaving a few chosen brethren entirely out of question. The frantic denunciations of the craft by Catholic and Protestant writers appear simply ridiculous, as also the affirmation of the Abbé Baruel that everything betrays our Freemasons as the descendants of those proscribed Knights Templars of 1314. The Memoirs of Jacobinism, by this Abbé, an eyewitness to the horrors of the First Revolution, is devoted in great measure to the Rosicrucians and other Masonic fraternities. The fact alone that he traces the modern Mason to the Templars and points them out as secret assassins trained to political murder shows how little he knew of them, but how ardently he desires, at the same time, to find in these societies convenient scapegoats for the crimes and sins of another secret society which, since its existence, has harbored more than one dangerous political assassin, the Society of Jesus. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We will pick back up with the accusations against the Masons. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. There is a word. I have a word. I am not allowed to dispense that word. It may or may not be the same word that they are looking for, but I do have a word of power that was given to me directly from God. And so I understand a little bit of what's being said here, even if I cannot expound upon some of it. It is an important word. It is. It really does make a difference in working things, but it is something that you can only get through divine revelation. I have not been given leave to dispense it to anyone. And so it is what it is. It is important to note that there is not a whole lot Christian about the Catholic Church. If you actually look at the rituals and the dogmas and the things that they say, several of which have been outlined in this particular study today. They believe that anything is possible as long as you are serving the church, and I do not. I do not believe that you can lie and reap the effects of that in a positive manner. I do not believe that you can steal and reap the effects of that in a positive manner. I do not believe that you can commit adultery or fornication in the wildness that is so prevalent in the monasteries. I believe firmly in standing where you are placed, right? With the divine knowledge that is given, the ethics and morals that everybody knows, even if they argue about where they come from. You're not allowed to kill people without extreme circumstances, right? You're allowed to defend yourself. I am not the turn the other cheek guy. But it should be the last resort when you cannot get away. There is no reason why you should be deceiving people in order to trick them into your religion. There is no reason why you should be sacrificing any animal or person for salvation. There is no reason why you should be deceiving people in this manner, unless you just want power. It seems like that is the motivation behind the Catholic Church. It is indeed power and not service to God. And that's where I'm going to leave this. If you like what I'm doing, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me talk about in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pip Steak. Peace.